So last week we were in the book of Luke, chapter 4. That's where Jesus reveals himself and says, I'm the Messiah. And then a group of people, they're all like, whoa, you're the Messiah. And then Jesus says, also, you guys are racist. And they're like, throw him off a cliff. And I'll just say this, as someone who has worked in ministry for about 17 years now, I'm just like, come on, Jesus, can't you just let him be happy for like 5 minutes? I mean, then there's another time. It's in John chapter 6. And Jesus looks at a crowd of followers. He's like, I have way too many followers. I need to preach harder messages. I'm just like, really? You believe that? You know, we always think more is supposed to be better. We want more people in church. We want more people there on Sunday. We want more people in the youth group. But back when I was a youth pastor, I would probably not grow a group to 40 or 50 kids and then be like, we just have way too many teenagers in this youth group. We need to run some of them off. But that is exactly what Jesus did. He said, I have too many followers. Let's run some of the not so serious ones off and just keep the serious followers. And like I said last time, Jesus could be pretty weird sometimes. And some of you might say, well, that's not so weird. He just wants the committed people. Okay, when is the last time you ever saw a pastor deliberately run off half of his congregation because he thought that the church was just getting to be too big? Okay, I have not seen that in any of the church growth books. That is not what they are talking about at any of the pastors' conferences. Nobody does these things. But Jesus did. Now, what if someone came to a pastor and said, how do I go to heaven? Should the pastor tell him how to go to heaven? What kind of pastor wouldn't tell someone who came to him and asked how to go to heaven, how to go to heaven? That is a pastor's dream, for people to come to him and ask him how to go to heaven. That's why we go to Bible schools. That's why they go to pastors' colleges. They spend years interning and preparing to lead churches so that they can tell people how to go to heaven. But yet, when a man came and asked Jesus how to go to heaven, Jesus didn't tell him how to go to heaven. In fact, Jesus told him to do something else that wouldn't even actually get him into heaven. I find this to be weird, and I'd like to explore why it's in the Bible. So turn with me to Luke 18, and let's get weird. Welcome to Weird Stuff in the Bible, where we explore scripture passages that are bizarre, perplexing, or just plain weird. This is Luke Taylor. Today we're going to be talking about the famous story of the rich young ruler. So Luke chapter 18, verse 18. And a ruler asked him, Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. So this is already getting strange right off the bat. Jesus is good, right? And he is God, right? Okay. So right from the get-go, he's getting weird. And anytime Jesus starts getting weird, you really want to slow down and analyze exactly what he's talking about. Verse 20, he says, You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother. And he, which is the rich young ruler, he said, All these I have kept from my youth. When Jesus heard this, he said to him, One thing you still lack. Now, I just want to pause right here for a moment. It's actually kind of silly that this man thinks he has kept God's laws perfectly, okay? That's a pretty high bar to clear. And yet this guy's just like, oh, yeah, I've totally done that. For example, it says here, do not bear false witness. That means to lie. Okay, now just think about it. Everybody in the history of mankind has lied before. Okay, it's about as universal as sin gets. Even my dog tries to lie. Like my dog is the loudest animal in our house, other than my 5-year-old. Okay, my dog can't even breathe quietly. His breathing sounds like snoring. All right. My dog's a pug. I don't think I said that. I have a pug. All right. Even just for him to breathe sounds like a laborious process. All right. And not only that, like Sometimes he lays around and he's licking himself, and it is not quiet. Okay, it's like digging into his own side as well as he can reach around. It's a pug thing. Pugs do that. It's this is life for a pug owner. All right, if you ever think about owning a pug someday, I'll just warn you. I love my pug, but I'm just warning you. It's always a little bit embarrassing when people come over. I feel like I have to apologize for my dog's existence at times. My wife's uncle came over once and he took one look at our dog. He says, "That is the ugliest dog I have ever seen." He said, "I can't tell if he's coming or going." So now listen, I think pugs are cute. Otherwise I wouldn't have one. But I mean, some people are not pug fans. They stare at my dog like they're staring at someone who's plunging a backed up toilet. Which, to be fair, that's also what he sounds like whenever he breathes. Now, I was trying to get to a point. Yeah, even my dog lies. Okay, I got a little off track there. Even my dog lies. Like, if he does something he's not supposed to be doing, he can suddenly become as quiet as a mouse. Okay, like he got under the bed one time, and he knows he's not supposed to be under the bed. And my wife could not find him anywhere. She's looking all over, and she's like, if he were here, we would hear him because he can't do anything. His breathing is so loud. He can't be sneaky. Except when he was hiding under the bed where he wasn't supposed to, he got quiet as a mouse. So he was deceiving us. All right. He found a way to turn it off. If he gets something he's not supposed to eat, suddenly he finds a very quiet way to eat that. So dogs can be deceptive. Here's what I'm saying, guys. Everybody lies. All right. Everybody has lied. Except for the rich young ruler, apparently. He just claims, "Oh, I've never bore false witness." So I read that. I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, but surprisingly to me, Jesus is just going to let that one slide. Here's what Jesus says instead. As he says this to the man who wants to know how to go to heaven. This is what Jesus says to him. Verse 22, "Sell all that you have and distribute to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me." Now, that is not the right way to tell someone how to go to heaven. Like, did you know there's other rich people in the Bible and they got saved and they did not have to do that? Like, that's not the way that you get to heaven. In fact, if it was, that would be salvation by works. And the Bible says that is not salvation. So what's going on here? Verse 23, "But when he heard these things, he became very sad, for he was extremely rich." Now, shouldn't the answer have made him happy? He wanted to know how to go to heaven. Jesus just told him an answer. Shouldn't he be excited? "Oh, now I know how to go to heaven forever and ever." But it didn't make him happy. It made him sad because he loved his stuff so much. Verse 24, "And Jesus, seeing that he had become sad, said, 'How difficult it is for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God.' And then Jesus chased after him and said, actually, to be saved, you have to believe I'm the Son of God and ask forgiveness of your sins." Nope, that is not what Jesus did. Jesus just basically ignored him after that. Just kind of shook his head, like, yeah, it's hard for rich people to get saved. And then Jesus just lets the guy walk away after not even telling him the right information. We'll get back to the story in just a minute. Let me just go ahead and tell you here, next time on this podcast, I'm probably going to talk about something that you've never studied before. I want to talk about head coverings in the New Testament. Because 1 Corinthians 11 has this passage about the importance of head coverings, specifically for women, and it kind of seems out of place. Most Christians just don't really know what to do with this passage, and don't know if women should be wearing head coverings. So I want to tackle that because it's a very strange passage, and I want to solve the mystery of head coverings there. And so make sure you're subscribed so you can get that episode. And I have a question for you all too. If you've been around this podcast for a while, you might know that I was doing a kind of verse by verse study of the book of Jude, and I got a little bit derailed from it a few months ago by all the Enoch stuff. So I was going through all the weird stuff in the book of Jude, and we got to like verse 14, I think. And that's where the Enoch part came in. And I kind of went off on that for about a month. And I've never kind of gone back into the Jude stuff. I've kind of got through all the weird stuff in Jude. But if you want me to take an episode or two to kind of go back and wrap that book up, or recap what we learned in it, just let me know. You can leave a comment or send me an email to weirdstuffinthebible@gmail.com. And so I'm just throwing that out there. You can let me know if that's something you're interested in, or if you just want me to keep going on random topics, I can do that too. I got some recent feedback on the podcast. So I had posed a question about why we don't really see demons in the Old Testament like we do in the New Testament. And I think I said that on the episode where I talked about the origin of demons. And so you can go back and listen to that if you want more context behind that question. But I got several responses to it. I got one here from Phil. He says, I'm assuming the reason the demons didn't show up in full force until the New Testament is because of Jesus' birth and ministry. With God's glory fully displayed in his son, maybe the demons understood their time was coming to an end, as with the world, and lashed out at humanity out of fear and desperation, and continue to do so today. Jesus also said that in the last days that it will be as in the days of Noah. I don't know what he meant by that, but there's a connection there. I think it's highly possible to see more and more demonic activity, and maybe the return of the giants as the return of the king comes closer. And how's that supposed to go down? No idea. Maybe the demons will inhabit new bodies as hosts with the help of AI and present themselves as gods once again and lead many astray in the last days. Or maybe all the UFOs we're seeing on the news these days, they are fallen angels seeking to impregnate women again. It's all speculation, of course, and not beneficial to spiritual growth to think upon too much, but it's fun and would be an awesome sci-fi movie. In any case, we have nothing to fear. Jesus has given his followers authority over the demons. They have no power over God's children. So I wanted to share Phil's comment there. It's pretty similar to my own view on this, and it touches on a lot of things I've been sharing on the podcast already. And so I just wanted to share it for that reason. Got a lot of good responses to that question. And okay, I had a couple theories. I kind of ran out of time on that episode to share those. I have a couple theories on why the demons don't really show up in the Old Testament like we see them on just about every page in the New Testament. And so, one, maybe there was just not really anything that could be done for somebody who was demon possessed in the Old Testament. And so maybe that's why we don't really see the Bible addressing it. Maybe it just took Jesus. It took the power of Jesus to come into this world. And that was what was necessary to cast out demons. And so maybe the Bible just didn't really get into that subject until the New Testament time, because until then, there wasn't anything to do about them. Maybe that's it. Here's another thing I was thinking about. Obviously, most of the Bible is written in the land of Israel. And the land of Israel was God's territory for pretty much all of the Old Testament, right up until the end of it. And so at the end of, and when I say it stopped being God's territory, well, then it got overrun by the Babylonians and the Assyrians, and the Jews get taken away to captivity for a while. So it kind of gets it gets conquered, basically. So here's what I was thinking. Maybe up until then, perhaps demons weren't really much of a problem in Israel because God had supernaturally protected his territory from them. And then by the time you get to the New Testament, and they've lost control of their land, and now the Romans are in charge, and perhaps also it's been infiltrated with all kinds of evil spirits. And so that's kind of another theory I have. Can't prove that. That's just an idea I'm throwing out there. So, okay, let's get back into today's lesson. I've got some thoughts here about the rich young ruler, and I want to talk about what was Jesus doing with this guy? Okay, what is he doing in this story? A man comes to him and asks him how to go to heaven. Did Jesus tell the truth to the rich young ruler? What was Jesus doing here? Well, the answer to that is Jesus was exposing to this man his love for his own possessions. This guy thought that he was perfect in every way. He thought that he had maintained God's laws perfectly. And what's kind of shocking to me is Jesus, he just kind of plays along with that. He's like, oh yeah, well, it sounds like you are pretty perfect, man. There's just one thing that you're missing. Jesus is kind of like Detective Columbo right here. If you ever watched that old show, Columbo was this detective who had just kind of a sense of pegging the bad guy whenever he'd walk into the room. He'd know who the bad guy is. He'd go around and ask questions at the crime scene, and he would act kind of oblivious. He would, He'd kind of let the criminal or the killer or whatever, he'd let them just kind of lie to his face, spin up whatever kind of story that he was, and whatever excuse he had, his alibi. And Columbo would let the guy go on, and then he'd act like he was going to leave. He'd say, "Okay, well, hey, thanks for your time. Thanks for clearing all that up. Just one more thing." and then Columbo would ask a question, and it would be a question that would kind of pull the loose thread that unravels the whole story. And so that's kind of what it sounds like Jesus is doing here. He's talking to the rich young ruler, and he's letting the rich young ruler talk about, how he's kept all the commandments since his youth. And Jesus is like, oh, yeah, you've kept all the commandments. That's great. You must be some kind of superstar. And then Jesus lays the big one on him. He says, well, if you really are such a great guy, if you really are so perfect and godly in every way, why don't you just sell everything you have and give it to the poor? Well, with that question, all of a sudden, the rich young ruler's heart is revealed to himself. You can just imagine the shock on his face at hearing that. And so when you think about it that way, Jesus really wasn't being all that weird at all in this story. What he was really doing was he was trying to give that guy what he needed the most. And sometimes the truth hurts, and it hurt that guy. But sometimes it's what we need to hear. All of us, we have something that keeps us away from God. At least one something. It could be several somethings. It's not necessarily money or possessions, but it very easily could be. I mean, we are a very materialistic culture in America. But there's lots of things that can come between a person and God. It could be your love life. There's a lot of people nowadays who say that God and the Bible are not allowed to tell them what to do when it comes to, for instance, their sexual decisions. So many people have left the church over this issue. Or the Bible says to date and marry Christians, to date and marry people who are saved. If you're a saved person, you should only marry a saved person. And you hear a lot of young people today are saying, I'll just date who I want. It's all going to work itself out. But the Bible has a command here on this issue. Another area that can come between you and God is your freedom. I mentioned before, I was a youth pastor for many years. And there was a lot of young people, especially when they get to when they pass their driver's test and they get their driver's license, and they're like, yeah, now I can drive to church. Well, all of a sudden, you don't see them at church all that much anymore. Now they say, oh, I'm just going to go out and do what I want. I'm not going to be at church on a Wednesday night. I'm not going to be at church on a Sunday. It happens with adults too. Listen, I get it. It's hard to get up on Sunday morning and go to church sometimes. If you work a 5-day work week, then you get 2 days to sleep in. And it's hard to give up one of those days and use it to go to church. I get that. I understand that. But this is why following God is a matter of priorities. Another thing that can come between us and God is, just like the rich young ruler, our money and our possessions. I think that we're all actually rich. If you live in America, if you have the technology to carry around a phone and listen to a podcast, you're probably richer than the majority of the world. Because did you know most people in the world live on less than $2 a day? 53 out of 100 people. They live on less than $2 a day. Have you ever bought a movie before? Like, you ever went to the store and bought a movie? If you did, you just spent more money than the majority of the world makes in 1 week. Let me just ask you a question. Who has running water and electricity at your house? Okay, I'm assuming you do. You're better off than a lot of people in the world. There's people in Africa who don't even have clean water. Or they might have to walk 2 miles just to get to clean water. Like, I have this picture on my computer. There's this kid in Africa, and he's like sticking his head down into a mud puddle to get a drink. And just because it's so hard for him to get to water, and this is what he's kind of has to do to survive. I saved that picture for perspective. It's hard to look at sometimes, but I keep that for perspective. And I think, man, if somebody could ever reach that kid with the gospel, that kid is getting saved easy. You know, you don't have to convince him that he has needs in his life. But then you go to an American who's got a 5G cell phone and a warm bed to sleep in every night, and he never has to worry about getting enough meals, and it's hard to convince him. One thing you lack. You need Jesus. So we Americans, we are at a real disadvantage when it comes to going to heaven. Because we have so many of our needs met that we can forget how much we need Jesus. We are so comfortable. We are so lazy. We have it so good. We have it too good. It's no wonder that this country has forgotten how much it needs God. We have cell phones, we have cars, we have air conditioning, we have Legos, we have Star Wars, we have Fortnite. Right now, my 5-year-old, he has Lego Star Wars Fortnite. We got all that stuff. And don't you think we had a better life today than the rich young ruler did 2,000 years ago? Like, all of us are way better off than he was. I mean, think about it. He didn't even have toilet paper. Okay, if I took a poll on this podcast, would you like to switch places with the rich young ruler? Would you like to have what he had and he can have the stuff you had? Would you want to switch places with him? No. You would never in a million years want to trade what you have for what he had. And yet, he didn't want to give up what little he had in this world so that he could go to heaven. And he didn't even realize how poor he was in comparison with we who would come along later. And it's like, we have so much, guys. No wonder this country has forgotten all about God. What this country needs are Christians who will stand up in this culture that can check its bank account balance and order DoorDash and book a plane ticket from our cell phones and have a Fortnite dance for every day of the week and subscribe to more streaming services than we even have time to watch and say to it, one thing you still lack. And if you think that sounds weird, I hope that you're a little bit more weird today, too. Thanks for listening. God bless you for sticking around till the end, and we'll see you next time.